Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wandering Jews with Mijal and Noam. I'm Mijal.
And I'm Noam.
And this podcast is our way of trying to unpack big questions being asked by Jewish people and about Jewish people. We absolutely don't have it all figured out, but we are going to try and figure some things out together, whether we make it there or not. It's really about the process of wandering together and leaving every episode feeling like we've all learned something.
That's so sweet. I love that opening. Anyway, so as we say every week, our absolute favorite part of this show is wandering with you, our dear listeners. So shoot us a note, ask us a question, give us feedback, provide suggestions, whatever on your mind by emailing us at our new and very improved email address, wanderingjews@unpacked.media. That's wanderingjews@unpacked.media.
So this week we actually have a special episode which has to do with that email address, because we are going to be reviewing some of the questions and comments that we've gotten in our inbox from listeners.
First of all, Mijal, have you ever written into a show or newspaper with a question?
Have I written into a show or newspaper with? No, I have not. I have commented on social media on people's content and thanked them for it. Does that count?
For our made-up game that we just came up with, I think it counts.
Thank you. Have you written?
I have not, but that's laziness. I'd like to. I would like to write Bill Simmons.
You really like that guy.
It's not that I like him. I don't know him personally. He might be, I don't know what he's like. I just think that his wizardry around basketball and the intersection between basketball and pop culture is just so darn interesting. And I learned from him in that sort of way. I'm so exposing myself right now. I actually don't think I know how to write into certain people. Like, I don't know. Like, I'd have to go through the process of like, wait, how, like, do I go to billsimmons@gmail.com? Is that his email address? Is that what I do?
He doesn't announce it in every episode?
I don't think so. So I'm sure if you went to his website, you could find out how, but it's a combination for me of laziness and incompetence that I have never reached out to him.
The show is not actively inviting emails.
I'm sure people reach out to Bill Simmons. He used to have this thing called the mailbag, and I never reached out. Anyway, okay, so we got interesting questions. So question number one is the guy named David. What's up, David? So David wrote in to us after our interview with Yair Ettinger. It was about religious Zionism and what religious Zionism is, where it's been, where it's going.
In Israel.
In Israel itself, yeah, specifically in Israel itself. And after the episode, which spoke about different aspects of religious Zionism, one of our listeners, David, he wrote in, he said he felt a little bit lost, and he wrote the following. He said, just off the top, might a fast and dirty explanation of religious Zionism versus political Zionism, plus any other ism, have better...
That's a lot of isms.
Yeah, have better equipped listeners to appreciate the pith and thrust of the conversation? The path and thrust of the conversation. So
let's try to define maybe or differentiate between religious Zionism, political Zionism, and Zionism. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, let's go for it.
You want to start? I feel like this is your cup of tea.
I don't know. So let's say Zionism is, by the way, this is like a good game because it's like you could talk about this for 3 hours, Noam, but can you talk about this in under 3 minutes? Okay. So
I'll time you.
Let's see what we could do. So I think it is important to distinguish between the two. Zionism is the overall idea that the Jewish people were returning to history on the world stage by activating their very latent but existent national identity and forming this new identity that's always been part of the Jewish story in the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Now, what Zionism did is, in many ways, it rebelled against Judaism as a religion in its early days in order to form this new identity. And so therefore it had people in the religious world who were unsure where they saw themselves in the Zionist story.
Okay. So I'll just say, Noam, I think I agree with what you just said, but I think it's very long and very dense.
Okay. So shorten it for me.
Well, but first let me just tell David that there are some debates about how to define Zionism.
Of course.
This is our takes on it.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, yes.
But I would say in colloquial, popular, and contemporary terms, we can talk about Zionism as the belief of the right of Jews to have national sovereignty in their ancestral homeland.
Okay.
Is that fair?
I think that it's so wonky to do this. I think that is what Zionism has come to mean. Yes.
Great. And then we can talk about the Zionist movement, which is that historically it described people, especially who started off in different parts of Europe, who wanted to take we're getting into political Zionism here, but Zionism describes a movement in time of people who wanted to create this Jewish state back when it was just a dream.
Correct. So I want to differentiate between cultural and political Zionism. What I think is interesting as it relates to religious Zionism is this ironic move that's been made. Cultural Zionism was this movement that was led by Ahad Ha'am, whose name is Asher Ginsburg, his real name, and he is from Eastern Europe. And he made this argument that the land of Israel should be the spiritual fountainhead of the Jewish people, and that Jewish culture should again be at the center of the Jewish story, and that Zionism is the belief that should be activated in a very serious and real way, and that Judaism should be a cultural focus, and it should be focused in a spiritual, meaningful way, but not in a way that was religiously an obligation for people, and that the land of Israel would be the place where that culture would emanate from, and that Jewish people would live in the diasporas wherever they lived, and that the land of Israel, being specific here, would be a place where lots and lots of Jewish people congregated and went to and developed very robust cities and culture and music and arts and society. That's what Ahad Ha'am was trying to develop.
Right. So we spoke about Zionism, we spoke about a Zionist movement, we spoke about cultural Zionism. Political Zionism is often associated with Herzl, Theodor Herzl, and other people like him who didn't necessarily have a quote-unquote like spiritual or cultural or religious vision. They wanted to have a nation state that was Jewish. Precisely what the spiritual, religious culture looked like in it was less important or secondary or not even as important as the ability of Jews to have self-determination and to have their own state. That very loosely and very simplistically is like political Zionism.
Right. And Herzl really believed that as a political Zionist, that the number way to end anti-Semitism in the world would be to be like any other country, any other people.
He might have gotten that wrong, Noam.
He might have. Yes, he might have gotten that wrong.
Wrong.
But then that's why there was the Uganda option initially that was actually in another eastern part of Africa called Kenya, and that they said they would be there as a temporary measure before they ultimately ended in the land of Israel, and that was voted for but ultimately knocked down. And it was the cultural Zionists that really, and the Eastern Europeans who were really just not okay with that. And here comes the irony. The irony is that if I were to ask you if religious Zionism in its early days was more identified as spiritual cultural Zionism or political Zionism, I think most people would say, well, of course, spiritual cultural Zionism, but that's actually not the case. In the early days, religious Zionism was mostly aligned with political Zionism because they viewed, led by their great Rabbi Reines, they viewed political Zionism as a matter of life or death. And if it was going to end anti-Semitism, it was the most politically expedient way to save Jewish lives. That was really revolutionary in many ways, because a lot of when early Zionism was being developed, the great religious rabbis were uncomfortable with it in the Ashkenazi world. In the Sephardic world, there was less discomfort with it than in the Ashkenazi world. But in the Ashkenazi world, there was some real discomfort with it. And then religious Zionism has come to mean a lot of different things over time. There's the great debate within religious Zionism is like this: is the purpose of Zionism in order to bring about messianic redemption? And that's argument number one. That's students of people like Rav Kook would make that argument, and they view it as what's called Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu, the beginning of the flowering of our redemption. And the state of Israel is that vehicle to enact that and produce that and really make that come to reality. Whereas other types of religious Zionists that come from the school of thought of people like Rabbi Joseph Ber Soloveitchik would say that the purpose of Zionism from a religious perspective is not to bring about messianic redemption, but to have a thick, deep Jewish identity in the land of Israel and to settle the land of Israel, which has always been a part of the Hebrew Bible and the Mishnah and the Talmud and throughout history. So it's less about the messianic aspect of the project and much more about the thick Jewish identity, which is the land of Israel. And that's been the great debate.
Okay, but that was a question that really had to do with some explanations, some theories.
Right.
As you can hear, Noam is the host of another podcast, which is all about Israel and Zionism and unpacking Israeli history. So it's really great to have you here, Noam, because you can really answer these things really well. Okay, second question. So Stephen wrote in asking, how he can speak with his kids about all the incredible things about Israeli culture while holding space for the political decisions he disagrees with. So he wrote the following. Since we do not live in Israel, don't vote, and don't pay taxes, it is very hard to reconcile the negative opinions of the government with the positive views of Israeli life, learning and culture, family, food, and so many other things. This is all a bit long-winded, sorry, the email was longer, to ask you to explore this topic for young, progressive, pro-Israel American Jews. So I think this is like a really good question.
Yeah.
Like, how do we talk about Israel, highlighting the good, but also not being afraid to critique? And also how, I think what Stephen was asking here, how should this conversation be shaped by the fact that, like, we don't pay taxes, we don't go to the army, you know? So have you thought about this now?
I think about this a lot.
Which aspect of it? Because there
are two different aspects of it. There are two different ways, or there are multiple ways to relate to Israel, and why should, just in an intra-Jewish conversation, I should say, what's the goal of connecting to Israel? Like, why does it matter to connect to Israel? Is it to support the Jewish state and to make sure that it thrives? Is it to connect as a Jewish people, regardless of where we all live? Is it to provide the security that will always exist no matter what?
But Noam, can we make it more grounded?
Yeah.
If we are talking to our children or our students, do you tend to focus on the positive things? Do you also talk about negative things?
So
what's like a healthy American Jewish way to speak about Israel?
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. If there's one thing that divides human beings, besides whether or not a hot dog is a sandwich or not, it's the following. Politics. So if we want young Jewish people to connect to Israel, and we do that exclusively in the realm of politics, we are necessarily going to alienate so many people, no matter what. But if we choose to connect young people to Israel, young Jewish people to Israel, and other people to Israel, not solely based on politics, then we have a much better chance of connecting people to Israel. Because people love food, people love culture, people love family, people love learning, people love life, people love hiking, people love a lot of things. And if your goal is to connect young Jewish people to Israel, and not Israel, but Israelis and Israeli society, then focusing on politics is just less necessary.
I'm guessing part of the reason Stephen is asking this question is that there is like a gravitational pull in American public discourse to talk about Israel only in terms of the conflict. So we only talk about Israel, which I think you're saying politics, but we only talk about Israel in terms of war for many reasons. Now, I don't think that it's bad to talk about politics or talk about the conflict, but I think we should engage with Israel in a similar way that we engage with America. Like with America, I know this country, I know good things, I know bad things, I know things that have to do with conflict, things that have to do, like you were saying, Noam, with culture. And I think we don't need to be afraid. The problem to me comes when we only do one or the other. You know what I mean? Like in some, pro-Israel educational settings, it's like only amazing things, Candyland. Yeah. And on the other hand, when we only talk about it, either demonizing it or only through the conflict.
Yeah.
So I think the question itself almost like gives the answer. Being able to talk to our children and our students and having very honest conversations, and also not being afraid to say, this is complicated or I don't know. So I'll give you an example. This is not with my children, but I have felt torn regarding how to speak publicly about the judicial overhaul, like internal politics in Israel during a time of war as an American Jew. Like, so, and when people have asked me about it, I've been honest. I've said, like, I'm actually torn about this. I think I have the following feelings, but I also know that I don't know the following. And I also feel like at a time of war, we might want to modulate the way we speak publicly.
If you disagree with what's going on or just in general?
Yeah, I think this is like my personal thing. I'm not saying everyone needs to agree with me, so I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I really like being constructive. And so if I were in Israel and I was participating in the political process, then I would be using my voice in a way that affects the political process. If I'm in America and I'm speaking about certain things that I don't know if they're affecting the political process, then the question is, why am I speaking up? And are there bad actors that can use it in different ways? So it's really complicated. I'm not saying there's easy answers here, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's okay to acknowledge when we are torn about certain things or when we're still trying to learn more?
I like that. I have a slightly different answer to this question that maybe Stephen wasn't asking, but it's what I read into the question. He asked about, like, listen, I don't pay taxes, I don't vote. It's like, am I allowed to voice an opinion about the government? So my answer is yes, and I'll say why. In the early 2000s, when there was, how do you talk about Israel question going on during the Second Intifada, what the generation was basically told in the United States of America, shut up and support. Like, just, that's your job, to support and clap and the like. And I get it. I really get it, because we want to make sure that there are so many people that are hateful and critical of Israel, and like, it's enough. We just need the Jews that are not in Israel to just support. Like, really close your eyes. Just like, if you agree or disagree, I don't care. And there are consequences. There are unintended consequences to that sort of request. And the consequence that I believe emerges when you ask people to say, you don't vote, you don't pay taxes, it is what ends up happening is you are essentially asking people to become automatons, robots, passive. And this gets to the previous question about what is Zionism. Zionism is the opposite of being an automaton. It's the opposite of being passive. It's the opposite of being in the stands. It's actually getting up and doing. So regardless of whether or not you pay taxes or you vote, to pretend like what happens in Israel doesn't have a manifest, deep impact on world Jewry is a little bit, it's either cynical, that's my not nice read, because like, it does, it has consequences on world Jewry, or it's naive and ignorant. And so therefore, I think world Jewry is all part of one larger group called in Hebrew Knesset Israel, in English Catholic Israel. We're all part of one body, and we have a shared fate, we have a shared destiny. And if you do have opinions on it, my belief is that you should share them, but you should share them in a way that's humble, in a very humble way, because your children or you are not going to the Israeli army, are not fighting that sort of fight. It's a different battle. It's a different challenge. So my request to people, and I speak to my own community about this, is absolutely don't just sit there. Don't just sit there. That's not called being a Zionist. Don't just sit there. Being a Zionist is doing something, but doing something in a way that's humble, doing something in a way that demonstrates that you have literacy on the topic and that you know what you're talking about. But to simply ask American Jews to sit on the sides, I think that is something that is 20 years ago and no longer relevant. That's my take.
Okay, no, I think we can do one more question, and of course, everyone can feel free to send in more, and we'll try to get through more. Also, we try. I don't know if we always do it perfectly, but we do try to respond over email. But Lindsay asked if we can give book recommendations. What is a good book that you have read this year?
Okay, I like that question. I love books. Have you
ever tried to keep track of how many books you read per year?
I have not. Is that a thing?
An obnoxious thing to do.
Who would I share that with that wants to hear the answer to that question?
People share Goodreads lists. They share every New Year's the list. I actually think it's helpful because you can get good recommendations.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So I love books.
Not just podcasts.
I don't really listen to so many podcasts recently. I got to get back on the podcast wagon. I'll tell you what it is. Every time I'm about to listen to a podcast, it's Pavlovian for me. I put on the podcast as I get on the flight, and I'm flying a lot. And then the second I turn it on, I start falling asleep. And
that is so good for you. I wish I could do that.
No, I sleep for 7 minutes. It's a thing. Okay. It's a shtick I have. It's a terrible shtick. Are you more of a history person, a biography person, or a fiction person?
I think for fun, biography, nonfiction biography.
I like that.
No, you start. What's your book that you like?
So I love history and I love biography. I wish I got into fiction more. I went through a period of rocking fiction and I loved it. It's cool to like fiction. That's my take. I haven't been reading so much fiction recently, but the book that I've read very recently that I really like is a biography about none other than, I have it right in front of me.
I don't know.
Rabbi Akiva by Barry Holt. I love it.
Why do you like this book?
First of all, it's historical fiction, if we're going to be honest about it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
He takes some...
I'm just saying, how much could you actually know about the biography of Rabbi Akiva?
Rabbi Akiva is a famous rabbi from which century, would you say? According to the book?
No, it's 1st to 2nd century.
We have some sources, rabbinic sources about his life, but of course we don't necessarily have historical records that we can use in the same way.
Right, we don't have that sort of thing. But I listen. He's someone that my parents always loved, Rabbi Akiva, and I've learned his stories from studying the Talmud. But I've never read a historical fiction of him. Or actually, this isn't meant to be historical fiction. So, but it's meant to be history. But the author Barry Holtz, who's a major scholar, he talks about how do you talk about historical figures that you don't have much history about, and he does a great job of bringing Rabbi Akiva to life in a way that I haven't gotten. But specifically, let me say this: Rabbi Akiva is the rabbi that I want to be. That's what I got from it. He's the person that I want to be. He has the leadership skills that I want to have, and he was the guy that people turn to, that the sages turn to when something bad was going on. You go to Rabbi Akiva. When something was challenging, if you don't know how to approach a difficult conversation, you go to Rabbi Akiva. And that's what a good legacy to have.
Yeah, Rabbi Akiva is really cool. Heschel, by the way, maybe one of his early books was comparing and contrasting Rabbi Akiva with Rabbi Ishmael, two rabbis from the rabbinic period. And he argues that some of the key philosophical differences that exist in the Jewish community until today go all the way to that.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I love that stuff.
I know. There are some interesting questions because he's really famous for his wife also, Rachel.
Yeah, he left her. He left her for a time.
I know. And I used, as a kid, I grew up with this beautiful story. She got him to be this big rabbi. And then as an adult, I'm like, what are we idealizing here? A wife who basically is away from her husband from all this time. And that's anyways, that's just my little question mark, which is not about Rabbi Akiva. It's about how we idealize that story.
There's one story where Rabbi Akiva is studying in years in yeshiva, and he comes home to his wife, and his wife is hearing from all the people around her, how dare this guy, her husband, not be around, and she's like, no, it's amazing that he's doing this. I love it. And then he never goes inside the house to say honey, I'm home, and give her a big hug and say, I love you too. I love that you love this. Just from hearing that, he went back to yeshiva and went back to continue learning Torah. And I always wonder, how did he know she'd be okay with that?
Well, also, Noam, it was male rabbis who preserved the story. I feel like they were trying to give a message. They were trying to say, don't bother us, woman folks, let us stay in yeshiva forever.
That was just burst my bubble.
I'm sorry. And I'm not even critiquing Rabbi Akiva. I'm just critiquing the way we idealize that story. Okay. So this is, can you see here? I adored this book. I read it this year. It's called The Best Minds by Jonathan Rosen. It's just you can see, when I read books, I always, what's it called? I put sticky notes in them.
You do that on Shabbat?
Yeah, because I don't write on them, which is really hard because I always have so many notes. So half my books that I read on Shabbat have sticky notes. But this book was brilliant. Sometimes when I hear that a lot of people like a book, I'm like, I'm not going to read it because I don't like doing what everyone likes, which doesn't say such good things about me. But then I picked it up because I actually met Jonathan and he's awesome. And this book deserves every single accolade and every single praise that it got. It is brilliant. I can't even say how good it is. It's the story of basically the friendship between the author and a young man that has mental illness and that ends up committing a terrible crime. But the whole thing is a very careful description of what happened. And it interweaves biography with the big intellectual, cultural moment that was shaping life. So you read this and you don't just read about this young man's very tragic mental illness. You read about the way that philosophers and psychologists were talking about mental illness in America and in the West and how that shaped different things. It was amazing. It is also a Jewish story because you really understand American Jews in this time period, in the suburbs. And I just adored it. I'll just say one more thing. When I read this book, I also loved the craft, because it is very self-reflective. Rosen invites you into the way that he's thinking about the world. He's humble, he's vulnerable, he shows where he was wrong. And for any authors that are trying to figure out how to combine personal with intellectual, it is just brilliantly done, excellently researched. I adored it. It was really, really good.
Amazing.
So,
okay, well, I'm going to check it out. I wrote that down.
So good. I'm reading now The Power Broker by Robert Caro about Robert Moses and New York. Just started it. Really good, but very dense. So it's going to take me probably a few months to get through it.
All right. Well, let us know when you
I'll come back to report. It's also a Jewish story because Moses was Jewish. So I'm learning so much about Jews. It's really interesting.
That's great. Okay. So there you have it.
Well, this was awesome. Just getting so many questions from our listeners, and really would love to get more questions or comments or concerns or disagreements or book recommendations, by the way. Please send them in.
Awesome conversation. Speak to you soon. I want to remind everyone that Wondering Jews with Mijal and Noam is a production of Unpacked and OpenDor Media brand. Subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast and follow Unpacked on all the regular social media channels. Just search for @Unpacked Media. And if you enjoy Wondering with us, please share this and other episodes with your friends. Do the whole 5-star review thing. It's great. Share it with your friends, your family. Write a review. It's always helpful to get out of the show if you really enjoyed it. Most of all, we love hearing from you. So shoot us a note at wonderingjews@unpacked.media. That's wonderingjews@unpacked.media.
This episode was hosted by me, Michal Bitan.
And me, Noam Weissman.
Hannah Dodge is our researcher. Rob Pera is our audio editor. And we are produced by Michael Weber and Rivka Stern.